Hi, everybody. Will here with this week's interview chair. This week we have Valerie Nunes-Atkinson in the chair. So sit back and relax and listen to Val for an hour or so. Thanks, guys. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. On today's interview chair, we have Miss Valerie Nunes-Atkinson. How are you, Val?
I'm well. How are you, Will?
Good. It's good to see you. You look great.
Nice to see you, too. Thank you so much. You ready for the holidays?
Oh, not really.
Either am I.
I don't even like thinking about it. It just seems to creep up on you so fast.
Absolutely. We just got past one, and it's a matter of a few weeks. We're right into the next one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You just had Thanksgiving down there. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Although it was a lunch. It was a lunch and on the way to a dog show. So
I know. I haven't had a real, like our Thanksgiving is earlier than yours, but I haven't had a real Thanksgiving dinner in ages and years.
Yeah. Yeah. I usually take the weekends off, that week off, but this year I couldn't.
Well, we have a dog show that actually has a dinner at the dog show, which is nice, but it's not the same.
It's not, well, because you want to be with your extended family, you know. So we had a very small, intimate family dinner, lunch, and then went on.
Well, that's good. At least you got to see everybody.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
I am.
Okay. And the first question. Tell me how you first got started in the sport of dogs and how old you were.
I was 7 years old. My dad actually started our line of short hairs. He wanted a hunting dog, a gun dog, and he knew a little bit about genetics and pedigrees. I mean, just through his own research. And he got a dog off the classifieds newspaper for $50.
So did my family. Exact same $50.
Yeah,
and I was 7.
Were you? Yeah, yep. 7. So, and she was just to be, her name was Heidi von Schmolt, and she was to be his personal gun dog. I used to go out and training with him in the field, and we met other people training. They introduced us to field trials. And from there, we got into field trials. So actually, a lot of people don't know this. The first 3 breedings of what is VJK now, it was Von Django kennels back then, were to national field champions. So we have strong field lines behind us. And that bitch, Heidi, actually went on to become the top dual producing dam of the year for the GSPCA. Wow. Back in 1974, I think it was. So, she wasn't that fancy. I couldn't finish her. I tried. I was a youngster competing against all those darn pros, and I could never get that last major. I got a million reserves to Rick Bird. And so anyway, Heidi did very well for us, produced a lot of show champions and got us going in the show world. And the way that I got into the show world was one of the people that we showed, that we sold a puppy from, our very first litter. Her name was Shotzi. We sold it to Dave and Donna Gillum, and they found out about the show world and confirmation. They said, Val, she's so good with the dogs. Can we just take her to a show? So I went and showed her their puppy from my dad and junior showmanship, and I got second. And that was the beginning of the end. So from there, I just continued on and had some really fantastic mentors in my life. And that's really what kind of pushed me forward. From there, I met a woman named Marilyn Stockland from Merrily GSPs. And I started going to dog shows with her. And she's really who kind of took me, her and my mother. My mother used to say she was my chauffeur. I was a daddy's girl. And so dogs and horses were my life, which were part of my dad. And I shared that with him. And my mom's like, I waited so long for this little girl. I'm the only girl in our I was going to say in our litter, in our family.
Yeah.
And she wanted something to share with me. So she used to take me to all the dog shows. She'd drive me everywhere.
So how old were you at this point?
Let's see. I mean, from that point, probably 10, because I couldn't wait to get into the point shows back then. The match shows were a big deal. We had match shows every single weekend. So from 7 to 10, I was just doing like match show circuit, I guess you could say, showing Heidi in the breed and then showing in juniors. And then once the AKC shows, that back then it was 10, it's younger now, but back then it was 10. And I started going to the all breed shows and qualified for Westminster my first year. And I went and did nothing, but it was a great experience. And that was my first experience with Madison Square Garden. My mom and I went back there. It was a huge snowstorm. And, it was really super exciting. But I started I started helping a couple different handlers back then. So Madeline Thornton with Poodles was one of the first people that I started kind of helping and just holding dogs ringside.
I don't know Madeline.
She goes by Madeline Patterson now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And of course, Barbara Humphreys. And Gary and Timmy and all of them. So I somehow started with toys and non-sporting and helping out with them. And then Linda Moss, do you remember her?
No, I don't.
Linda Moss, she had a mini poodle. It was the number one mini. His name was Billy. I think something in his name was Contraband. He was a big winning dog back then. And she had short hairs. And she got a short hair from my dad. So that's kind of how I got into the poodles and the very young poodles and short hairs. And I started going, it's funny how you transition from, we all have mentors, but they change as you develop and get older and learn different groups. And all these people were so inviting and encouraging to me. We had some great handlers on the West Coast back then, Dick Webb, Porky Vroom, Tom Tobin. Those were the people I watched growing up, So I was really interested in the handling part of it. But I was also learning the breed part of it through my breed mentor, Marilyn. And my parents divorced when I was about 13 and my dad got out of the dogs. And so from that point on, it was really Marilyn and I. And we started co-breeding. She was Marilee's GSP. So we had some winners that carried the Von Django and Marilee prefix. And I was young. I was a teenager, finishing high school. I started working for Rick and Nancy Bird. I enjoyed that and learned a lot about all breed dogs there. And actually, when I was 15, I went back to Westminster. I'd went back every year. Never did anything until my last year. Back then it ended at 16. So when I was 15, I went back and my short hair bitch, which was from would have been our second or third litter. She came out of the crate lame on the day it was juniors. And I was back there with Rick and Nancy Bird. And I'm in tears. It's my last year. All I wanted to do was win Westminster. And so Dave Gillum, who had bought his very first short hair Shotzi and taken me to my very first show, had continued breeding from that bitch and moving on in his own program. And he had a dog named Donovan Sir Ivanhoe. He was the number one sporting dog at the time. Rick was campaigning him. And as what happens at the garden, he lost the breed. And so Dave came up to me and said, "You want to show Ivan in juniors?" And back then, you had to switch sides and do all the crazy stuff. Yeah. And so I was 15. I'm like, sure. And I remember signing papers and I went in with this dog I had never shown before and actually went on to go best junior. So it was pretty exciting,
That's a great story.
Yeah.
I didn't know that your original dog had gone lame. I knew you'd gone best junior. I didn't know the story though. So
her name was Valkyrie. We used to have remember you'd stack the crates really high. So she was in a high crate. And I don't know. And she was older by then too. And so she came up lame. Yeah, it was sad.
Yeah.
But it worked out, you know.
It worked out. And now it's a great story. So
yeah, it worked out. Yeah.
What happened from there? So you won best junior at Westminster, which is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. From there, I mean, I continued to work for Rick and Nancy until they moved to Washington. They lost a child and ended up leaving California and moving to Washington. I started working for Marippy. And that's really who I learned the most from. I mean, we all know what a great dog person she is, and all aspects, breeding, showing, conditioning. And that's who I learned the most from. So I worked for her through high school and into college. And, once I started going, I went to San Diego State. Once I went down to school, I kind of didn't do the shows as much. I still did them. And I was kind of starting to show for other people at that time too, but just, hey, you're a really good handler. You want to show my dog? It was that kind of thing. I think we would call them jockeys now, but I did. I showed just a couple of short hairs. It wasn't other breeds. I was just showing short hairs for other breeders and going to school and got my degree and continued on showing dogs and breeding dogs. Maryland. So now we're up to 2000 around. I won my first best in show on a bitch called Dirty Dancing. And that was back in my teens, I would say 16 or 17 years old. And I had a couple dogs that I bred with Maryland that did really well at the group and specialty level, but I could never win best in shows on them. Bruce Schultz had the Britannia bitch out at the time.
Yeah, remember her?
And so I was competing against Bruce, and which were also big idols of mine too. Bruce and Gretchen were, these are all sporting dog people that I grew up watching and idolizing.
They were idols of mine as well, those two.
Yeah, just great people. And Jo Schallenberger, Gretchen's mother, was a huge influence in my life. Kind of more from my mid-teens on when I started breeding with Marilyn. And then even after that, just because she had Traveler. And that was a huge moment. I think when I saw Trav, he had won Westminster. He was at a local show, and, in an X-Pen. And I knew who the dog was. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Right. I had Sports Illustrated,
That's cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. David Flanagan actually gave it to me. He passed on a bunch of stuff from Joe and Traveler to me. And
because he used to work for Joe. Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. He slept on his bed, he said. He would tell me all kinds of stories from them.
He was a great storyteller.
Oh, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He was my phone-a-friend on all long drives, Yeah. We would catch up, and he always had great stories. But it was really important that I got to know Jo, and I wanted to pick her brain, and I wanted to know how to make a dog like that. And that's kind of where the breeding part really started to take off. We had a show out here called Shoreline Kennel Club, and she was a founding member of Shoreline. And I joined Shoreline so I could get close to Jo. And Jo was head of hospitality. So I was in her hospitality committee, and she was, I want to say, once you knew her, she was, personable, but she was more of an introvert.
Yeah, I never knew her. So
yeah, she was kind of, she's quiet, she was kind of hard. Once you knew her, she was, outspoken, but, and so I figured that's how I could get to know her. But going back to Trav, when he came back and he had won, and, I was young and, stalking the pens, basically walking by, watching this dog in the X-Pen. And finally, I can remember her leaning against her van. She smoked cigarettes. She was smoking a cigarette. And she's like, "Are you ever going to come over and say hello to this dog?" And I'm like, "Me? Yeah." So she said, "Come on over." And I went up to the pen, and he came up to it. I remember sticking 2 fingers through the X-Pen and scratching his cheek. And she said, "You want to take him for a walk? He needs to go on a walk." And so I took Traveler on a walk. And it was then that I knew I wanted to make a dog like that. that was really what pushed me. And from that point on, then I could take litters of puppies to her and show her puppy litters, and we would talk dogs. And I had a dog, actually that dog behind me, Toby, that really was my first big winning dog. And all the handlers wanted him. Bruce and Gretchen really wanted him. And Joe told me, don't you dare let any of those handlers take that dog. That's going to be your first big winner. You keep that dog for yourself. And he was owned by a older lady that didn't have any money. And I ended up co-owning him with her. I showed him, finished him. Here's a good story. So I finished him at a show. We were getting ready to go to the Nationals. And I was probably, let's see, when was Toby? He was like late 80s. So I was in my mid-teens, 18, 19. And I was wanting to save him for the National. I don't remember who was doing the National, but I wanted to save him for the National. I think I had that Dirty Dancing bitch. That was a special at the time. So I didn't want him to finish, and he needed a major to finish. But I figured I could show him at this one last show, just get a point or two and move on. So Walt Schallenbarger was judging. And Susie Oliveira, who's a real good friend of mine from childhood, she was going to help me. So I was going to show the Dirty Dancing bitch. She would take Toby. He went winner's dog, but he couldn't win the breed. Otherwise, he'd get a major and finish. I wanted him to have 1 point left to go into the National. So we go in the ring. Back then, it was a huge entry, probably 50 or 60 short hairs. We probably had 25 specials. So he's working through all the dogs, and we get down to the end, and he brings winner's dog and winner's bitch back in, and he makes his cuts in the specials, and he works all the specials. And then he says, I want this dog, which was me with the bitch, and Susie with this class dog to go around the ring. And I turned her and I said, you make him gallop. You
lay down.
and so she's like, okay. So we start going and we go around the ring, and Toby's galloping and having a great time. And Walt's like, stop. And he's like, I can be here all day. I can stand here and wait for that dog to tire out, but I want you to make him trot. And I know you can. So I'm like, you make him gallop. So we go again. And again, he starts galloping, and he just makes us keep running. And as soon as the dog broke down into a trot, he goes, you're best of breed, and finished the dog with a huge. Susie was bawling, sorry. All right. So,
oh, wow. What do you do? Right.
I know. Exactly. And he should have won. And he went to the National as a baby and got a ward of Erin, I believe, if I remember correctly, and came back. And from that point on, I brought him back and started specialing him. And I think he got maybe 13 best in shows. And I think was maybe number 5 sporting dog in the country. Never had a single page of advertising, not one page. Pat Lawrence, Mrs. Clark, Mrs. Billings, they would all come out. I would win groups, some best in shows on them under Pat and Mrs. Clark. And they would say to me, who is this dog? Why have I never seen this dog? But that was the good days when you had such great judges that they would find quality dogs and just, they would win. Yeah.
It was not to see the advertising. I know.
Yeah. He never had a single page. When he retired, he won. He went on to win the National under Paula Nykiel when he was 10 years old. He also, I brought him, he'd never won the Garden. He'd went opposite in Award of Merits every year. And so then he was retired and put up. And at 10 years old, I brought him back out, and it was Terry Hunt doing the breed. And he won the breed, and he went on to a Group 3, I think, under Jenny Line. Yeah, she'd always loved him as well. Yeah. And I can remember in the group at the Garden, she came up to him. She said, "Well, hello, old man. It's nice to see you again." He's old. Yeah. So he was basically the start of it all, and he went on to be I don't even know how many times he's been top producer. But he's really, when you look at short hairs and everything that I certainly have shown, he's behind it so many times. Him and Traveler. Yeah. So it's pretty, yeah.
It's wonderful. Like this, a judge like Judy, that she recognized them and says hello to them. I love that,
Absolutely. Yeah.
It doesn't happen a lot anymore. I love that.
So. No. Yeah. I mean, and that he made a name for himself with nothing,
Right. Yeah.
He made a name for himself and was really respected. I mean, everybody knows Toby, Well,
I always say to people, because they worry about stats, I'm going to lose number one. Sometimes it's not the number they remember. It's the individual dogs. So
absolutely. Well, I mean, and that's, I think that is where we need to go in our sport too. I mean, I think we really need to look at what we're promoting, and yes, stats, it's part of the game. It's part of our sport. And I do it professionally, I mean, I graduated college. I went on and worked in the real world and showed kind of part-time for a while. And then for like the last 25 years, I've done it full-time professionally. And so we owe it to our clients. That's what we're hired to do. Right. But when you look at producing breeding stock and a family line of dogs and trying to move a family forward in breeding, I don't know that that's the stats and that part of the competition is the best for all the breeds,
Well, let's face it, 250 shows. If you've got a quality dog, you can amount to something no matter what. So.
Right. And sometimes in some breeds, even if you don't have a quality dog, if you still go
I was trying to stay from that quality.
I mean, it's just a dilution of everything. Yeah. And we all talked about it through the years. And I think every 5 years or so we go through, how do we change the stat system? How do we make this better? And everybody throws out a variety of different ideas. And I don't know that I have the answer to that, but I do know, trying to go to so many shows to do your job for a client, isn't maybe the best thing,
No.
Yeah.
He said that's a lot of shows on one dog, and it wears them down, wears you down, wears them down.
Yeah. And I think I would rather go to the big shows with the great quality of dogs and great depth of quality and win those shows than going to 15 smaller shows and picking up the same amount of points.
And those are the wins people remember. They remember dogs that win those shows.
Absolutely. Yeah. So after I started, professionally, I got married, had kids, the whole shebang and showed a lot of great dogs. But really, I consider myself a breeder first and foremost. I mean, I love handling. I'm passionate about it and I love learning about new breeds, but I love my line of dogs that I've created and that I've, tried to move forward in a positive manner. And I think they've done really well. And I'm really, really proud of them.
Oh, you should be. My God, it's a family right now, it's one of the first families you think about when you think about German short hairs. So
yeah, that's nice. Thank you. Yeah. And they're all over the world, influenced that dog. Toby really has influenced so many, and he's produced, there's something to be said about a dog that's a top producing dog that can produce other top dogs and producing dogs, not just 100 champions, but a good amount of dogs that have went on to be number one, to win best in shows and nationals and Westminster. And, that's really, I think, what really speaks to a great dog. I think great is used on dogs too often. There's not many great ones. Yeah.
Yeah. But you brought up Westminster, so now I'm going to bring up Westminster as well. Let's start with Miss Carly.
Oh, Carly. God, I loved her. She was actually sired by Toby, dog behind me. And she was bred by Lucretia Coonrod. And she was my stud fee puppy back. So I took two out of that litter. I took a dog and a bitch. And I ended up co-owning her with another local breeder, Carol Kronk, and finished her. She was a huge mover. She was really beautiful.
Fun to watch, that's for sure.
Yeah, she was a fun one. And we started campaigning her and showing her. She was still too young. I showed her like maybe 8 months and put maybe 8 or 10 best in shows on her, won the national. She was top 3 sporting dog. And then I had a little bit of a falling out with one of the co-owners on it. And she ended up going to, she went to Clint first for a year. And then she went to, Michael and Michelle, and they showed her for a couple of years. She was number 1 the whole time, top sporting dog. And then she ended up winning best in show there. She was retiring. That was a really surreal moment for me because she was kind of, we all know how dogs in their campaigns, they kind of gain momentum, they peak, and then they start at the end of their 2nd or 3rd year, they start to go down. And so she was at the end of her career. And I was with Bill McFadden and a bunch of people, and we weren't watching the groups. We were back at the hotel, and it was on the TV, and she won the group under Paula. And I'm like, oh my God, we've got to get over to the garden. So we went over, and I remember how we used to be able to stand in the tunnel.
I love that part.
Yeah. And I was standing in the tunnel watching her in Best in Show with Michelle, and Amy Rodriguez was standing next to me, and she hit that free stack that everybody talks about. And she hit me in the arm, I remember. And she goes, "You're going to go Best in Show." I'm like, "No, she's not." And sure enough, Lynette Saltzman gave her best. And that was really incredible. Yeah, it was super fun. So she never was really bred right, sadly. So I wasn't able to keep much from her and move on. But others came after her from Toby. That CJ in 2016 was. That dog was my heart. Yeah.
Well, you want to tell that story now? Because I remember when the class dog won the breed of the guard, and it was like, wow.
Well,
we all rushed over to watch him.
Really?
Yeah.
He was a star. I started him at Del Val. Actually, I showed him in a little specialty in San Diego, and I think he went 2nd. I want to say. But then I put him up, and I think he was about 9 months, and I took him, 7 months. I took him to Del Val, big short hair specialties, lots, 30 champions or so. And I just waited and showed him the last day to David Flanagan. And, I just started to get to know David on a better basis, but he knew me through Joe, and he knew what I was trying to do with the dogs. And so I was excited to show him this dog that I had worked so hard on, and Gretchen, they all came over. It was like golf carts around the rings because they all knew I was going to show this dog that day. And he walked in, he was a baby puppy, and bred by, he went winner's dog, he went best of breed over all the champions. And, that was basically the start for him. I then waited and took him to the specialty in Orlando and showed him there. That was Jason Hoke. And he won the sweeps under Larry Cornelius. And then I showed him in the breed again. It was 30 specials. All the top dogs were there, and he won the breed from the classes. And so he had 2 5-point majors. I waited until he did a year and took him to the garden. It was Jim Covey. And I remember walking I was really nervous that day. I don't ever get nervous. And I was nervous that day in the breed. And I took him into bred by, there was another dog with me, I believe, that wasn't really even trained. Mine wasn't trained. It was his 3rd time in the ring. But that dog, I swear, did it on him. I did nothing. He just did it on his own. And so I remember Jim coming up to go over him, and he says to me, "I'm really excited. This is beautiful." And I was like, I don't even know what I said. I have no idea what I said back to him. And I go out, and again, all 35 specials, and he works through all of them. And as only Jim can do, and then he gets through them all. And then I'm standing in the corner for the whole time doing nothing. And he's like, "Bring the winner's dog up here and take him around." And that was it. So And I was really proud of him. We went in the group, that's a big group to go in your fourth show. And I have a picture from that, and he was beautiful. He was a teenager, but he was beautiful.
I remember.
Yeah.
I love how proud you look telling this story. I like it.
Yeah. Well, when you look at, as a breeder and you go back through all the tears, blood, sweat, and tears you go through, some turn out, some don't. You make a mistake, you pick one that doesn't turn out, you let one go that turns out and it's neutered, or, he really was the culmination of everything for me, And so then move forward a couple of years and we go back there, and, again, we're just starting. I went into that. I'd shown him that the year before, and he was still young, still young. And I think I went in with like 17 best in shows on him, but he was just starting, and he just turned 3, like a week or 2 weeks before the garden. So I was trying to save him to get him to at least 3. Our short hairs look so good, like Toby winning at 10. I mean, They look so good at 5 and 7 years old. And so it just was, I guess it was just meant to be, the way it happens at the garden and everything, and rumor the shepherd was going to win everything. And we get in there, and
you had won 2 groups by Best in Show.
Yes. Well, the Borzoi, actually Shota showed the Borzoi in the group.
But the dog was with you.
Was coming to me. Yes. So I was going to start it the next year. And Lucy had been top dog all breeds in Japan. And Shota, that was his final show. That was his first Westminster too. He'd never been there.
Well, then I was talking with Dr. Mean doing Best in Show that
yes.
So it was a fun Best in Show.
Oh, it was so exciting. And so she goes reserve Best in Show, Lucy, and he goes to turn, and I'm thinking, I'm already ready to. I mean, I was not nervous for that group at all. So I'm like, I'm the long shot, and he starts to say German, and I'm ready to turn and congratulate him. And he's like, short hair pointer. And that was a great moment. That moment well.
That was exciting. That was an exciting Best in Show.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very exciting. And I think what was so great for not only the show, but our dog show public and the general public was he was just a great ambassador. I mean, he was really a great dog for people to be able to come up, hold them, kiss them, hug them, do whatever they wanted, much like your beautiful bitch, Miss P.
He was a breed that was so easily accepted by the public because he wasn't what they all think of fancy. He was like a dog, he could be my dog.
Yeah, absolutely. And he, that from the first time I showed him to anything I asked him to do, he just did it. He was very unusual dog. We had to do the second day of the media tour, we did a thing for JetBlue in the airport. And, they ask you to do corny things with these dogs, and so they wanted him at the kiosk, like he was putting his paw to check in or something. I mean, they were opening up a big dog park in inside JetBlue in the terminal. And so they wanted him to be part of that. And so I just asked him, showed him what I wanted to do. The dog just does it. I mean, he was ridiculous that way. Same thing on the plane, everything they wanted him to do was some kind of corny stuff, and they wanted him to do. And you jump here, sit here, whatever we asked him to do, he just did. With Whoopi Goldberg on, what is it? The View. Yeah. She has a bad back and has to wear a brace, or some sort of back brace. So they wanted him to sit on a chair. I'm like, fine, bring a chair, no problem. So she couldn't bend over. And they brought a stool, like a round stool that spins. And so, and he was unsure. And then, he figured out a way to sit on it like an elephant on a little pedestal or something, and sat there and did the promo with Whoopi so that she didn't have to bend over. He's an incredible dog. It was really tragic. We lost him to Cryptococcus. when he was young, 7. And that's a airborne fungal disease that comes from bird droppings. So bird droppings dry, and then they get blown in the grass and the wind and the trees and whatever. And the year before, we had a litter of hawks in the tree that is in the main grass area of my backyard. And something that I learned was hawks, are probably most birds, to keep their nest clean, they go to the bathroom before they fly into the nest and when they leave the nest. So when we had these fledglings in this nest, which we could see, I remember that summer being in our swimming pool and watching the babies, up in this nest. And but there was, bird poop everywhere that would get washed down, or the sprinklers would come on and would dilute it. But it would dry during the summertime and then blow into the grass. Having a bird dog that uses their nose, he's out there in the trees and the grass, and he must have got it, and it attacked his central nervous system. There's 2 different types, the way that it attacks their body. One is nasally and the other is in their central nervous system. And it took him pretty quickly. So
incredible.
It was heartbreaking, to say the least.
I couldn't imagine.
I mean, I just didn't think I'd recover from that one. I really didn't. And that was really, really difficult. But during that time, I had a bitch that was pregnant with a litter, and she was ultrasounded at 28 days, I think, with 4 puppies. And this was during the time that CJ was ill. And when she ended up having her babies, she had only one when we x-rayed her. And she had that one singleton, and that is my new dog. And he's pretty spectacular. And he's a clone of CJ. I mean, wow. Physically, what you look at him, the difference is he has a dark tail and CJ had a white tail. I mean, they're hard to tell apart. And so, the saying always is you only need one. And isn't that true for breeding too? You only need one really to move a program forward, Right. So I don't know. He doesn't act like CJ. He's a lot more on the muscle than CJ is. CJ just, whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. And Phoenix is like, whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. Yeah. So yeah, super, super dogs. I've been blessed.
Oh, and you've been the reason too. So
I say it's a lot. A lot of times I think we all say, "Oh yeah, good luck." A lot of luck, but there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. It. We all put a lot of really hard work into whether we're handling dogs for other people or, breeding dogs. And in this day and age, with the way that the shows are, with breeding, it's actually a little bit easier now because we can ship semen and import dogs, which helps us diversify. I'm doing that in the last few years, bringing some dogs in from Australia and semen in. I brought semen in 15 years ago. We just used it again. But to open up our pedigrees, because we get so tight and we need new blood. And so
the world has gotten smaller, that's for sure. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
what about if, we spoke about your mentors somewhat, but what about if a youngster came up to you and said to you they wanted to be a professional handler? What kind of advice would you give them?
That's a tough one.
You couldn't talk them out of it.
Yeah, it's a tough one because it's changed so much. I mean, Antonio Vidmar, my assistant, he's been with me. Well, he says 10 years. I say 100 years, but
you're very lucky. He's great.
I'm so lucky. Yeah, he is absolutely the very best. And he's absolutely going to go on and have his own career. He's put the time in correctly. He's learned everything. He knows,
which is so unusual for this day and age.
Absolutely. He's learned every aspect of it. It's not just showing dogs in the ring. Yeah. That's just I always say that's the icing on the cake.
I call that 15 minutes of fame right there.
That's it. It really is. All the hard work is done, Monday through Thursday before you go to the shows. that's where the real work is put in. And then running your business properly. We're basically independent contractors, so we have to provide for our future ourselves. And I think a lot of handlers don't run their business properly. They don't save, they don't make investments, they don't plan for their future. And so I've helped a lot of juniors. I love, I'm a junior judge. I judge juniors. I do handling seminars like you, which I've found my voice in that because I love teaching and bringing other people along and watching their victories, But I would say go to school, get a job, have a real career and show dogs along the way with valuable mentors for you. And if it's still there, like it was for me, I remember going to my parents. I had probably worked in the real world. I was a journalism major, so I worked with different newspapers and magazines. And when I was ready to really commit to it full time, I remember sitting my mom and my stepdad down, and I said to them, my degree did not go for a waste. It's not wasted, but I want to show dogs full time. I want to do this. And my stepdad was the one that encouraged me. He's like, if you can do something that you're this passionate about, you'll never go to work a day in your life. Do it, and you step into something. And when it's that easy, you are doing what you're meant to be doing, and so I would encourage any junior. To go to school. It doesn't mean you have to go and get a degree. It would be great, just because I think like going to school after high school, you can never go back to that time in your life, kind of where you're, and a new adult, you maybe don't have as many responsibilities as you would 10
You're not
years.
quite adulting yet.
Yeah.
In
You're
between.
maybe not married or have children, so take that time to enjoy those life experiences, because you can never go back to that. You can go back and get a degree later, but, just take that time and really thoroughly enjoy it. That's where I'm a little iffy with the dog shows and the juniors midweek. In the homeschooling, there's a lot of people that have been homeschooled that have done great with it, but I don't know that that's what we want to push, and so I'm kind of for juniors should be held on weekends and maybe long holiday weekends. I think having juniors at clubs on shows midweek where it encourages juniors, because now they have their own stat system too.
Right.
And that's what you hear about, and that's what you see. And I think it's the wrong impression. I think we're giving the wrong impression to them. And then we wonder why they don't want to work for a handler too. They need to work for handlers. They need to learn the business inside and out before they become a handler themselves. And that's what we see now. There's very few people that spend years working for a handler like you and I did and learning every single aspect of it. It just doesn't happen anymore. So
it's so hard because it even falls back on our judges, because not that they're not as good as, there are some wonderful judges out there, but some dogs win with new handlers that are just theatrical, should I say? I don't know how you want to say it, but you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
Why do I have to do all this? I can just become a handler.
Absolutely. They get rewarded for it. They get clients. But then unfortunately, I think we all get grouped into, it's a handler situation when there's an accident, when there's something that went wrong in the care of animals.
Right.
And it was with a handler. Well, that handler is a lot different than what I do and how I care for my dogs. I learned from Rick and Nancy Bird, and they were kind of hardcore old time handlers. They had, I slept in the truck every single night. Those dogs were never alone. It is the way I was brought up and learned how to care for animals. There's things that I would never do, and unfortunately, if they never worked for a handler that was raised that way or brought on that way, they'll never know. And so now we're so many generations away from that. They just finish, they print a rate sheet and they start showing dogs. And unfortunately, we see some accidents that way too, which is really disappointing and hard on our sport, and yeah.
When you said about staying in the truck with the birds, I was the same way. I was the one that had to go stay in the truck.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. I mean, generators and air conditioners they're made by humans. They're mechanical. Things go wrong.
That's right.
And so if you have a human in there, it's not going to go wrong. If it's, if something turns off or goes off, you're going to wake up because you're uncomfortable.
That's right.
So, So anyway, I think there's a place for the new, and there's some really talented handlers.
Oh, there sure are. Yeah.
Really talented handlers, but I don't think it's for everybody anymore. I mean, it's a hard life. We miss a lot. I mean, talk about Thanksgiving, birthdays, anniversaries, weddings. It's not for everybody, it was for me. And I've made it work with my family and my children, but it's
think
not
about it now, Val. When I was showing more actively, there wasn't as many shows. I think, oh my God, I'd be exhausted. I look at Adam and Katie and just get exhausted watching them,
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. No, it's far too much now. I just think I would love to come up with some other system, and you've heard of probably a bunch, but I mean, I think we should have something where there's this, well, first of all, the regions, there's got to be regions, because like what I'm going through this year, there's no points on the West Coast in my breed. I mean, we've lost a lot of shows since COVID. In fact, I was just looking at the new year. I mean, I think we have 2 weekends, one big weekend and a tiny weekend in January. There's no points, and there's not going to be any points. So if you want to go and try to campaign a dog for something, you've got to go to where the shows are, So I don't know, maybe something with regions, because all the East Coast people, they have choices. They get to go 4 hours in any direction and 4 different states. We don't have that. I go from Southern California to Northern California. It's a 9-hour trip in my RV. So that's a full day's drive,
right.
But I also think maybe a stat system where you only are allowed to count a certain number of shows. You can pick the shows. You check off a box that basically says, I want this to count towards my overall standing. And let's say it's 75 shows. You can go to 250 shows if you want, 100 best in shows on a dog or something, or you're trying for something else. But as far as the stats are concerned, I think a certain number of set shows that you determine, and it's the same for everybody.
That's what it comes down. Like Wayne and I have talked about this in the podcast, and it always comes down to that kind of situation. We said like maybe 100 shows.
Yeah.
Same idea, and it's a matter of making everybody agree.
You pick them. So you want to go to 100 big shows and make the shows count, go for it,
Sure. Yeah. It works out. If you had 2 sporting dogs, you could pick 100 shows for this one and 100 shows for that one. And
absolutely. That too. So we could still keep clients happy.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a tough one though. It's a tough one. We're starting to see the result of too many dog shows.
Absolutely. I mean, they're just diluted. The judges, the shows, and the quality of the dogs and the numbers of the dogs. I mean, it's just something's got to change. Something's got to give, I think. But on the other hand, AKC is a business and they want to make money. And so you have to devise a system that's not going to hurt their bottom line if it's ever going to fly. I mean, I don't know what the answer is.
No. We talk about it almost every week. We almost feel like we're beating a dead horse. We got to stop talking about it, but we talk about it every week.
Yeah.
That sort of leads me into the next question. What about judging for Val? Are you going to judge?
I've went back and forth. I wanted to judge all my life, and I've enjoyed judging some sweepstakes and at the national. but then I enjoy a lot of other things in my life too. And so I will judge. I know I will judge. I just don't know that I'll give up handling for judging and judge every weekend. Yeah. There's a lot of other things I enjoy. So I know when I get to that point, I love traveling. So I'll be traveling. I'll be doing something else. And my horses, I love riding. So, but I'm judging in Orlando this year. So I'm doing a bunch of sporting breeds and the sporting group in the sweepstakes.
Good. That'll be fun. You'll get a good entry there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'm also doing whippets too. So I dabble in breeding whippets as well. So I got whippets, which I think there's like 33 puppies. It's a good entry.
Oh, that's very good.
So I will judge. I definitely will judge. I don't think we can complain about judges unless we're willing to step up and make a difference ourselves, And then I've had some people, some really, influential old timers that say, why you can't make a difference. But I think if we all just make a little difference and
Yeah, I agree with you, because I think if you look at it now at our generation, if you go back a few generations, this is the age they're all starting to judge.
Yeah.
And it's our turn, but it's almost become not impossible, but it's been made very difficult for us to do that, to go from one to the other.
Right.
Financially. So.
Right. Well, hopefully some of the new changes will help some of these people and handlers that have devoted their entire lives to it, and make it a little bit easier for them to step in and get assignments and be able to do a group and move forward. Because, before it was really difficult to be able to get breeds and be valuable to the clubs that are not making money, and they need those judges that can do multiple groups. And, so it's like
they are trying hard. AKC is trying very hard to find the answer. So.
Yeah, I think so too. So eventually I'll get there. I don't know when. I keep thinking after this dog, but look at you.
Well, it's hard. I still like showing my dogs. So I have my own dogs and I show my own dogs, but I like judging too. And I was told at the beginning of the year, because I made that change from handler to judge, that you got to stop. You got to stop, Will, because now you got to wear one hat and that's it. That meant I would have gone to 3 dog shows all year long. I've been going to dog shows my whole life. That would have taken a lot of my life and my friends and family. And
absolutely. And I think there's a fine line between being a judge and showing your own dogs. But I think a lot of our very best judges have families of dogs that they've bred for generations. And we need them just as much as we need judges to continue, the purebred dogs and be a preservationist, So I think you have to continue breeding your dogs, but just be respectful of that line that, if you're judging more, maybe you're not campaigning a dog yourself and or one of your own dogs. That's a hard line. And it's a hard line. Yeah. It's a hard line for owner handlers and people that maybe don't do it at our level too, because they always want to think something else, and so I think you have to be careful there, show it specialties and breed your own dogs. And I don't know what the answer is to that either, how you determine that, but I think it's just using good judgment, I guess.
I had that conversation with Ginny Lime, and she still shows her dogs in British Columbia. Not so much anymore, but she did when she was active. And that's what she said to herself. She's going to show her dogs in British Columbia and judge everywhere else. So,
yeah, absolutely.
And so she kind of kept both worlds going because she enjoyed showing her dogs. So.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think we need them. God knows we need good breeders.
Right.
Yeah. And that's another thing. I think what we see in juniors too, going back to the juniors, is we see them coming out, like we've talked about, wanting to be handlers, wanting to be superstars, wanting to be winning best in shows. We're not developing breeders anymore. And I've talked with a variety of people, Mary Beth. kind of designed a program that I would love to be able to get some help on and push forward. That is a 5-star program, and it goes back to the basics. So it's incorporating a lot of what they do in the horse world and 4-H and FAA, bringing kids, starting them young with mentors and teaching them the basics. And they have to. So my program would be, you get a star for every year, and there's a set criteria that you have to accomplish each year. And you have to have a mentor sign up with you. So hopefully it's a breed mentor in your area. If it's not, it could be a professional handler, someone that is going to be held accountable with you to make sure that you learn this criteria for this year. And it starts with the basics. I mean, back when you and I were in juniors, we did all that crazy stuff where we moved from side to side. We answered questions in the ring. We had to know our breed history. The judges could ask you that. And although that was all silly at the time, the questions were great. But even moving from side to side, that was all valuable in teaching you, how to move with your dog, paying attention, knowing what the judge was doing so that you didn't get caught on the wrong side. It had its purpose, I think. But we had to learn basic anatomy. We had to know the parts of the dog. I mean, that sounds so silly, but I've talked with breeders when I've been, grading litters for clients or just other breeders that are watching me grade a litter. And they don't even know when you talk about layback or upper arm or, the pastern or the hock. I mean, they don't even know the basics. Yeah, so this juniors program would start with the basics, and you would move up according to how you accomplished it each year, from 1 star up to 5 stars. And it would take you through everything, and it would get them into the end. You're going to be learning basic genetics. You're going to be, breeding dogs, collecting dogs, artificial inseminations, learning how to ship semen. I mean, you're going to learn everything, and we're developing breeders. I've had people that have worked for me that were super talented, but they never wanted to breed dogs. They just would buy their next dog. Yeah. So I think our sport has split. We have people that use it, which is great, as a family outing. They have their purebred dog. They want to show it and they enjoy it, but they're never going to be breeders. They'll just buy their next dog that they'll enjoy showing, and that's fine. But our breeder side, we don't have those up and coming breeders. So how do we make new breeders?
That's a great idea. I like it.
We need new breeders. How do we encourage them? I was talking with someone, I was in Cleveland a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about it. And maybe it needs to be a separate program. Maybe it needs to be a separate event with scholarships that encourages the people to get involved, the children to get involved and go through this program. But the key factor is having a mentor. It takes them back to, it's kind of pushing them back into having what you and I did with handlers, having someone that teaches you this, shows you, how to groom it, know your standard. I mean, know your standard. I'm involved with the parent club, juniors program. And that's the first thing we talk about every single time we meet is know your standard. Know your standard inside and out. I read it the other day about something, I constantly am reading standards. So how can you present a dog as a professional if you don't know the standard on that dog? And so many of these people, they just, here's my rates. I can take that dog, any dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. That's a great idea to your program. I love it. So
yeah. So someday I'll get it going.
In your spare time. So.
Maribeth leaves me messages. I want to hear about your program. Let's talk. Yeah.
No, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Okay. I have one more question because I've kept you a long time. One more question. If you could run into the 20-year-old Val, is there any advice you'd give her now?
So much goes through my head. So much goes. I would say just to keep moving forward, just have your vision, have your determination of what you want. And I'm a dreamer. I've always been a dreamer.
Nothing wrong with that. That's great. I love it. I'm a dreamer too.
I am a dreamer. And so I always say, dream big, dream really big, because you never know what can come true. And for me, like winning the garden, that was my biggest dream. I dreamt that. I mean, I made that happen. I made it happen when I was in juniors. So The Secret, the book, The Secret. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I haven't. No.
So it's the law of attraction, basically. And it's how you think and how you manifest things and bring things forward.
Write that down. I'm going to look it up.
Oh, that's awesome. And when that came out, The Secret, but it's the law of attraction. When I was 15 and for juniors, that last year, when I wanted to win Best Junior, I went to bed every single night and I made myself dream a movie. I called it a movie. And I went to bed every single night thinking about this movie and going through the moves of what was going to happen and how it was going to happen. And back then, so we had photographers, Canon photographers that took pictures, and they would send you the strips, of proofs. So when you looked at the strips of proofs of me winning and then going and getting the sash and everything for juniors, it happened exactly like it was in my movie in my head that I played. So the law of attraction, it brings things forward. And I think a positive mindset and kind of pushing away all the busyness and the noise of, sometimes people get caught up in the dog shows, and just having your mindset, your focus, and moving forward in a positive manner, and always dream big. I already have new dreams,
That's so interesting, because you talk about the laws of attraction. Some of the wins that I've had, I've thought about them prior as I'm driving. You're driving and then you plan it out in your head. You're planning out, oh, this is how it's going to happen. This is how it's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we won our first Beagle National, was like 92. I remember telling the owner, I won it on the way home from Belleville. As I was driving home from Belleville. That's when we won the National.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The mind's a powerful thing. So to your ability. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I have to thank you, Val. That was a great interview. I'm so glad you spent time with me.
Thank you.
I love it.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Okay. I'll catch up to you somewhere. I won't see you in Florida this year, but I'll see you somewhere, I'm sure.
All right. The garden.
No? Oh, yeah, maybe. Yeah. Well, two of my buddies are judging my fees for clothes.
Right. Yeah. Happy holidays. Have a wonderful holiday with your family. You
too, Val. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thanks, Val. That was a great interview. I love catching up with you. And your idea about the program I hope it takes off. That's a great idea. If you want to catch up with me, you can go to Will Alexander's Dog Show Tips to find out what's happening in my world. If you like this video, press the like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget about the podcast, The Dog Show Drive, every week with myself and Wayne Cavanaugh. Until then, take care, guys.